I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these stories. You know, the ones where the evil HOA president terrorizes their neighbors over something petty. I had my little slice of paradise before this mess started. 30 acres of open land. A quiet house set back on a ranch that had been in my family for 2 generations. The only road leading into my property cut straight through my land. And for decades it wasn't an issue because it was just me and a couple of scattered neighbors. I enjoyed my evenings sitting on the porch, listening to cicadas and sipping coffee. My biggest problem used to be whether to mow before the rain or after. That was it. Then one day, developers came knocking. They bought up the fields surrounding mine, and before I knew it, they slapped down 90 cookie-cutter houses, a playground, and a bright blue HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance. And where did they put that entrance? You guessed it. Right across my private road. They figured, oh, he's just one guy with some land, what's he gonna do? At first, I didn't mind. I thought, fine, let the families move in. Doesn't affect me. But that changed the moment I got my first letter in the mail. It was from the newly formed HOA. And what was my violation? A non-compliant decorative structure, also known as the garden gnome that sat on my porch. I'll never forget opening that envelope. The paper was cheap, like it had been printed at Staples, but the letterhead proudly declared, Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. The letter read, Dear resident, your property has been found in violation of community guidelines due to a non-compliant decorative structure, garden gnome. Such decor is not permitted, as it disrupts the uniform aesthetic of Maple Ridge. You are required to remove it within 7 days to avoid fines. Regards, HOA Board. I laughed. Actually laughed. Then I remembered, I wasn't part of Maple Ridge. I owned my land outright, paid no dues, and had never signed a single contract tying me to them. Still, I called the number on the letter. Hi, I think there's been a mistake. I don't live in Maple Ridge. I own the land next to it. The woman on the phone, her voice pure, HR Karen, replied, If you're using the community road, you are under our jurisdiction. I nearly choked. My road? The one my grandfather paved himself in the 1970s? That's when I realized these people were serious. I told her politely that I wasn't a member, hung up, and left my gnome exactly where it was. 7 days later, I got a final warning. About a week later, I heard a knock on my door. Standing there was the HOA president herself. A woman in her 50s, platinum blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand. If you looked up Karen in the dictionary, you'd see her picture. Good afternoon, she started. I'm Cynthia, president of Maple Ridge HOA. I noticed you haven't complied with our notice about the gnome. I replied, That's because I don't live in Maple Ridge. You all built across from me, not the other way around. Her smile was tight, like it was glued on. All properties accessing our community road fall under our jurisdiction. It's in our bylaws. I pointed down the driveway. That's my land. My road. Your community entrance literally crosses my fence line. If anything, you're accessing my property. She didn't like that. Her nostrils flared. Well, we'll see about that. The board will be in touch. And with that, she spun around and stomped back to her SUV. I knew then that I had a storm coming. The next month was a circus. I got 3 more letters, each more aggressive. One accused me of letting my grass grow too high, on 30 acres of ranch land. Mind you, another complained my fence wasn't aesthetic. Then they said my mailbox was non-compliant, because it wasn't one of their HOA-approved black metal ones. Every letter threatened fines. Hundreds of dollars. And every time I wrote back, not a member, not paying. They even sent a so-called compliance officer to take pictures of my property from the road. I caught him crouching in the ditch with a camera. When I confronted him, he mumbled something about community standards and ran back to his Prius. Meanwhile, all 90 of those new families drove past my porch every morning and evening. My quiet road was now a highway of minivans and SUVs. Kids cut across my field to get to the playground. People parked on the side of my fence. My peaceful ranch life? Gone. That's when I started documenting everything. Every letter, every picture, every encounter with Karen. I wasn't planning to fight back just yet, but I was preparing. If the HOA wanted petty, I could play petty. I bought 2 more garden gnomes and placed them right at the end of my driveway. One had a "Welcome to MY Ranch" sign, and the other was flipping the bird. Karen nearly fainted when she drove by. The HOA retaliated with another letter. Final notice. Your property remains in gross violation of Maple Ridge standards. Continued noncompliance will result in legal action. At this point I was laughing. But then something changed. I got a notice taped to my door, handwritten this time. It read, "Remove your gnomes or else." No signature. Just that. That's when I knew this wasn't just bureaucracy anymore. This was personal. I spent that weekend digging into HOA bylaws. I downloaded Maple Ridge's entire handbook. 84 pages of ridiculous rules. No basketball hoops. No clotheslines. Only 3 paint colors allowed for houses. Grass height regulated to exactly 2.5 inches. Then I found the kicker. A clause stating all common property had to be maintained without trespassing on non-member land. Which meant they couldn't legally use my road without a formal easement. And guess what? No easement had ever been filed. My road wasn't theirs. It was mine. I checked county records to be sure. Yep. Title deed in my family name since 1974. That's when the idea hit me. If they wanted to play games, I could shut their whole neighborhood down with 1 chain and a padlock. But first, I needed to make sure I had everything in writing. A week later, I got an official invitation to a Maple Ridge board meeting. The letter was practically dripping with smugness. We encourage you to attend so we can resolve your ongoing violations amicably. Failure to attend may result in escalated action. Perfect. I showed up to the clubhouse where they held their meetings. Inside, about 20 people sat in folding chairs. Karen was at the front with her clipboard, looking like she'd just won an Oscar. She started. "We're here to discuss the ongoing non-compliance issues of Mr. Rancher." I interrupted. "You mean the guy who doesn't live here and owes you nothing?" The room got quiet. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Karen turned red. "As president, I have authority over any property accessing our road." And that's when I dropped the bomb. "Your road? That's my land. My deed. You don't even have an easement. Which means technically, every one of you is trespassing every time you drive home." You could hear a pin drop. After that meeting, word spread like wildfire. Half the neighborhood thought I was bluffing. The other half started asking me questions. "Wait, is that true? Do we actually drive on your property every day?" Yes. Yes, they did. Karen sent out a mass email trying to spin it. "Residents, do not be alarmed. The board is taking appropriate action against false claims of property ownership designed to intimidate." But the county records didn't lie. A few residents checked for themselves and confirmed what I'd said. Meanwhile, I started getting friendly visits from people asking if I'd really close the road. I told them, "Depends how many more gnome letters I get." The HOA decided to escalate. They hired a landscaping crew to mow the strip of grass along my fence without my permission. I caught them in the act, weed whackers buzzing. I marched out and yelled, "You're trespassing." The foreman shrugged and said, "HOA hired us. Said this was common property." That was it. I'd had enough. The next morning, I went to the hardware store, bought 2 heavy-duty chains, 3 padlocks, and bright orange private road and no trespassing signs. That evening, after the last car left for work, I locked the gates across my road. By morning, it was chaos. 90 families were trapped. No way in, no way out. Minivans lined up at the gate honking. Karen was out there screaming into her phone, waving her clipboard like a weapon. I sat on my porch with my coffee, enjoying the show. She finally marched up to my gate and yelled, "You can't do this. You're holding the community hostage." I shouted back, "You said it was your road. Fine. Use it without me." "Oh wait, you can't." The sheriff showed up a few hours later. He checked my deed, scratched his head and said, "Well, he's not wrong. This is his property." Karen looked like she might explode. I wasn't heartless. I knew people needed to get to work. So I came up with a deal. I printed a notice and taped it to the gate. Access to this private road requires a rental fee of $50 per household, per month. Payment due on the 1st. Non-payment will result in loss of access. The HOA lost its mind. Karen called it extortion. I called it landlordship. After all, if they wanted to treat me like part of their HOA, I'd treat them like my tenants. Some neighbors actually paid up quietly. They slipped envelopes in my mailbox. Others started parking at the grocery store 2 miles away and walking in. Meanwhile, the HOA scrambled for lawyers. The HOA's lawyer sent me a nasty letter claiming I was violating community rights. My own lawyer, who was having the time of his life, sent back a 3-page response with county maps, deed copies, and legal citations. Turns out, without a formal easement, they didn't have a leg to stand on. In fact, they were liable for back pay. Technically, they'd been trespassing for months. When that news hit, the HOA board members started to panic. I heard one resigned immediately. Karen doubled down. She called an emergency meeting. I attended, purely for entertainment. The clubhouse was packed. Residents were furious, not at me but at the board. One man shouted, "You told us we owned the road." Another added, "Why didn't you secure an easement before building here?" Karen tried to calm them down, but her voice shook. "We'll resolve this legally." I stood up and said, "Or you can resolve it simply. Recognize I'm not part of your HOA. Stop harassing me with letters, and negotiate a proper agreement." The room erupted. Half cheered, half argued. Karen pounded the gavel like she was running Congress. After that meeting, support started shifting my way. Neighbors who once ignored me now waved and said, "Thanks for standing up to her." A few even admitted they hated the HOA rules, but had been too scared to speak up. Karen sent me one last desperate letter. Remove the gate immediately or face legal and financial consequences. I framed it and hung it on my wall, because by then I'd filed my own lawsuit for trespassing and damages. When my lawsuit hit, Karen cracked. The board realized they were staring down a case they couldn't win. Rumor spread that several homeowners threatened to sue her personally for mismanagement. At the next meeting, she broke down crying. "I was only trying to maintain standards," she sobbed. The board voted her out on the spot. Just like that, Queen Karen was dethroned. The HOA approached me, hats in hand. They offered a formal easement contract with annual payments for road access. I negotiated hard, $200 per household per year. Cheap compared to rent, but enough to make a point. Most neighbors were relieved. They signed quickly. The HOA, stripped of Karen, became a lot more reasonable. I kept my gnomes. Life slowly settled back down. The traffic never went away, but now every car that drove by was paying for the privilege. Neighbors stopped sending me dirty looks. Some even brought me pies as thanks for getting rid of Karen. I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching my gnome stand guard at the gate. My ranch wasn't quiet anymore, but it was mine. And best of all, I'd won. Looking back, it's funny. All this started because one woman couldn't stand a garden gnome. She tried to bully me into following rules I never agreed to. But here's the thing about bullies. They crumble when you stand your ground. Now, whenever a new family moves into Maple Ridge, I make sure to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm the guy who owns your road. Welcome to the neighborhood." And I point at the gnome flipping the bird. Justice served, one petty decoration at a time. Just when I thought things had settled, the new, reformed HOA decided to pull one last trick. They sent me a proposal, packaged as a community improvement project. According to their letter, they wanted to beautify the road by paving it with decorative bricks, adding light poles, and planting flower beds along the sides. Of course, they pitched it like it was a gift to me. Your property value will increase. What they left out was the fine print. The HOA would control maintenance, which essentially meant they'd try to reclaim partial authority over my land. Classic move. I called the so-called project manager and said, "Let me get this straight. You want to decorate my road, then claim responsibility for it? That's like me painting your house, then demanding I get to decide when you mow your lawn." He stammered, "Well, it benefits the whole community." I cut him off. "The whole community is already renting access from me. You don't get to double dip." When I refused Karen, Yes, she'd resurfaced as a consultant. Sent me a personal note. It would be in your best interest to cooperate. Best interest? That's HOA code for will make your life miserable. So I did what I do best, I documented it all and sent copies to the county. If they wanted a war, they were walking straight into another public defeat. Weeks later, the county commissioner called me. He said, "We reviewed the HOA's proposal, and we've determined they overstepped. You're free to manage the road however you like." That was the nail in the coffin. The HOA had lost every battle. Their threats, their fake violations, their desperate grabs for control, it all crumbled. But the story didn't end there. Something unexpected happened. A few families came by, not angry this time but grateful. One dad shook my hand and said, "Honestly, you taught us something. We were scared of the HOA. You showed us we don't have to put up with nonsense." That meant more to me than any rent check. Because now Maple Ridge wasn't just paying for access. They were learning to stand up for themselves. Karen? She vanished. Rumor had it she moved 2 towns over to start fresh, clipboard and all. As for me, I kept the gate, the chains, and yes, the gnomes. They'd become symbols of my stand. Every time I look at them, I remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be pushed around. Now whenever I drive down my road and see 90 houses lined up beyond the gate, I smile. Because no matter how many rules they write or threats they send, one fact remains unshakable. It's still my road. And they'll always rent it from me.